Hey, spooky people. It's your best friend Kenny here, and we are now at the final part of Tier 4 of the Unsolved Mysteries and Weird Things Iceberg by Juan the Pickle. Let's get spooky. As we finish this tier of this Unsolved Mysteries and Weird Things Iceberg, make sure that you're subscribed to this channel, The Spooky Lawyer. Make sure that you like and share this video. Share this video with everybody you know. Come on, let's get this done. All right. Let's get into it. The Devil's Tower. I think most people know what the Devil's Tower is. But for those who don't, the Devil's Tower is a geological formation located in northeastern Wyoming, and it's composed of igneous rock, which means it's a hill with steep sides and a flat top that was likely formed by magma that cooled and hardened underneath. It's 1,267 feet above the Belle Fourche River and stands 867 feet from its summit to its base. That means its summit is 5,112 feet above sea level. It's considered a sacred site by many indigenous tribes, including the Lakota and the Crow people. It became a national monument under Theodore Roosevelt. It's known for hundreds of parallel cracks, making it a popular and challenging destination for rock climbers. While most scientists agree that it was formed from magma, the exact process of how it was formed is still debated and is unknown. The Devil's Hole. The Devil's Hole is a geological formation in Death Valley National Park in Nevada. It's a geothermal pool within a detached unit of the park, meaning it's separated from the main part of Death Valley. What makes the Devil's Hole so special is that it's, first of all, the only natural habitat of the critically endangered Devil's Hole pupfish. This tiny fish is found nowhere else in the world and is adapted to the extreme conditions of the Devil's Hole. It's a geothermal pool. The water in the Devil's Hole maintains a constant temperature of around 93 degrees Fahrenheit and has very low oxygen levels. The pool is the surface opening of a vast underwater cave system that has been explored to the depths of over 436 feet. It's a valuable site for scientific research, providing insights into desert aquatic ecosystems, geological processes, and climate change. The site has cultural significance to indigenous people, including the Timbisha Shoshone tribe, who consider it a sacred place. Due to the fragility of the ecosystem and the presence of endangered pupfish, the Devil's Hole is closely monitored and access is restricted. The Devil's Kettle. The Devil's Kettle is a waterfall located in Judge C.R. Magny State Park in Minnesota. It's a unique geological formation where the Brule River splits into two streams as it flows over a rocky ledge. One stream flows normally over the waterfall and continues downstream to Lake Superior. However, the other stream flows into a deep hole in the rock known as the Kettle and seemingly vanishes without a trace. Despite numerous attempts to track the water's path, including using dye, ping pong balls, and even GPS trackers, they're throwing Apple AirTags in there. No one has been able to definitively determine where the water that enters the kettle resurfaces. The Devil's Kettle is formed by a mass of rhyolite, a volcanic rock that's as hard as granite. This rock is eroded over time, creating the unusual split in the river and the deep hole where the water disappears. While the mystery of the Devil's Kettle remains unsolved, recent research suggests that the water likely flows underneath and rejoins the Brule River further downstream. However, the exact path and location where the water resurfaces is still unknown. The basement tapes. Now, this could be one or two things. It could either be related to Bob Dylan or it could be related to the Columbine shooters. If it's referring to Bob Dylan, this refers to a collection of recordings made by Bob Dylan and the band in 1967 in the basement of a house known as Big Pink in western Saugerties, New York. While some of the recordings have been officially released, a significant portion of the material remains unreleased and is considered lost media by fans and collectors. If it's the Columbine basement tapes, the Columbine basement tapes are a series of video recordings made by Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold, the perpetrators of the Columbine High School massacre in 1999. These tapes were recorded in the months leading up to the attack and contained disturbing content, including hate speech. Harris and Klebold expressed racist and hateful views towards specific individuals and groups. They detail their plans for the massacre, including their weapons, targets, and desired outcomes. They rant about their feelings of alienation, anger, and resentment towards their classmates and society in general. They offer apologies to their parents for the pain they are about to cause. The tapes were discovered by investigators after the massacre and were initially kept from public release due to the graphic and disturbing nature. However, transcripts of the tapes were eventually released, and experts have been shown in documentaries about the Columbine shooting. Now, I understand that this is lost media, and lost media circles are generally searching for any and every type of lost media, and I understand that there's a lot of people who are interested in the Columbine case. However, this stuff, there's really no interest to this for me. I really don't care what these two idiots thought or what these idiots' plans were. They were high schoolers. They didn't have any interesting thoughts. What they did was terrible. So I really don't think giving them this sort of credit is worth it. This isn't interesting. This is just the rants of some idiot high school kids that turned out to be absolutely psychopathic people. The Hill of Crosses. The Hill of Crosses is a site of pilgrimage located in northern Lithuania, about 12 kilometers north of the city of Šiauliai. It's a small hill covered with hundreds of thousands of crosses of various sizes and materials placed there by pilgrims over the centuries. The exact tradition is unknown, but it's believed to have started after the 1831 uprising, when people began placing crosses on the hill as a form of resistance and remembrance. The Hill of Crosses is a symbol of faith, hope, and resistance for the Lithuanian people. It represents their religious devotion. It's a testament to the deep religious faith of the Lithuanian people, particularly their devotion to Catholicism. It's a symbol of national Lithuanian identity and resistance against oppression, particularly during the Soviet era when religious expression was suppressed. It's also a place of hope and remembrance, where people can come to pray for peace for their country and to remember their loved ones. The tradition of placing crosses is believed to have begun after the failed 1831 uprising against Russian rule. Despite attempts by Soviet authorities to destroy the Hill of Crosses, people continued to place crosses there in defiance. Pope John Paul II visited the Hill of Crosses in 1993, further solidifying its status as a significant religious site. Today, the Hill of Crosses continues to be a popular pilgrimage destination for people from all over the world. It's a place of reflection, prayer, and remembrance, and a testament to the enduring power of faith and human resilience. This is pretty cool. I've never been to Lithuania, but it's probably a very powerful thing to witness, regardless of whether you are of Lithuanian descent or not. Sailor mouth. Sailor Mouth is a lost media SpongeBob SquarePants episode. In this episode, SpongeBob and Patrick learn sentence enhancers, also known as swear words, and use them excessively with the actual words bleeped out by dolphin noises. The lost media aspect comes in with the idea that somewhere a version of this episode exists where the voice actors actually swore. This is plausible, as they likely did swear during recording to get the performance right, but whether the audio was ever preserved separately is unknown. There's no official confirmation that a fully uncensored version was either saved or distributed. The idea of this version has circulated in fan circles for years, and it's fueled by SpongeBob SquarePants' fans' desire to hear this episode. In 2023, a lost media content creator claimed to have been in contact with someone who had access to the uncensored audio files. However, the authenticity of these claims remain unverified. Some videos claiming to have the uncensored audio have surfaced, but they've been debunked as using AI-generated voices. Essentially, it's a case of we don't know for sure, and it's possible that an uncensored version exists somewhere in Nickelodeon vaults or in someone's personal collection. But until evidence emerges, it's a rumor and rumored lost media lore. I've talked before that I love the idea of lost media. This is kind of a pretty good example of that, like this idea that this recording exists. Now, I'm not a big SpongeBob fan. I don't really care one way or the other. I don't really need to hear SpongeBob swearing. But this is sort of a good example of the intrigue behind lost media. Here's something that was recorded and, it existed, was never released, but was released in a different form. And the idea being there's this possibility that this, uncensored version of this exists. There's just sort of there's just something neat about lost media. And even in something like SpongeBob, which, like I said, it's not something that I really need to hear. I find it pretty fascinating. Sea peoples. This term refers to a confederation of seafaring raiders who sailed the eastern Mediterranean Sea and attacked Egypt and other regions during the late Bronze Age. Their identities and origins remain a subject of debate among historians and archaeologists. The Sea Peoples wreaked havoc on the eastern Mediterranean region, but they are considered a significant factor in the late Bronze Age collapse, which, we've discussed the collapse of the Bronze Age, but it was a period of widespread upheaval and decline in the ancient world. The exact origins of the Sea Peoples are unknown. Theories suggest that they may come from various regions, including Western Asia Minor, the Aegean Islands, the Mediterranean Islands, Southern Europe. The Sea Peoples were not a single unified group, but rather a collection of different tribes and peoples. Some of the most commonly mentioned groups in the Egyptian record include the Shurdan, Sheklish, Luka, Tersha, Akawasha, Peliset. I don't know what any of those groups are, but the Sea Peoples engaged in raiding, piracy, and warfare, targeting coastal cities and civilizations through the eastern Mediterranean. They were skilled sailors and warriors, posing a significant threat to the established powers of the time. The Sea Peoples' attacks contributed into the collapse of several major Bronze Age civilizations, including the Hittite Empire and the Mycenaean civilization. They also disrupted trade networks and caused widespread instability and chaos. These historical entries are sort of fun because, you learn stuff that you don't really know about. I've never heard about the Sea Peoples, and I honestly don't really see a situation, which I really would have, because I don't really spend much time reading about ancient European history. But the idea that they have no idea where these people came from is pretty fascinating to me. Much of what we know about the Sea Peoples comes from the Egyptian inscriptions and reliefs, particularly those found in the mortuary temples of Ramses III. These sources depict the Sea Peoples' attacks on Egypt and provide valuable information about their appearances, weapons, and tactics. Archaeological findings have also shed light on the Sea Peoples. Excavations at sites like Troy and Hattusa have revealed evidence of destruction and upheaval consistent with the Sea Peoples' raids. People have been researching this and investigating this, and no one really knows where they came from, why they were like this, or what happened to them. Sort of like this lost civilization that would just sort of pop in and cause a bunch of chaos and then disappear. And we like chaos, so... Lady of the Dunes. Lady of the Dunes is the nickname given to an unidentified murder victim whose body was discovered in the dunes of Provincetown, Massachusetts in 1974. Her identity and the circumstances of her death remain a mystery despite numerous investigations and forensic efforts. The Lady of the Dunes body was found in Race Point Dunes in Provincetown, Massachusetts on July 26, 1974. For nearly 50 years, it is one of Massachusetts' most famous cold cases. A young girl was walking with her family when she discovered the body. The woman was lying face down on a beach towel and her hands had been removed, possibly to prevent identification through fingertips. Her head was nearly severed, and she had been badly beaten. Despite efforts by local and state police, the woman could not be identified. A composite sketch was created and circulated, but no one came forward with information. The lack of hands and dental records hampered identification efforts. Over the years, many theories emerged about the Lady of the Dunes' identity and her killer. Some speculated she was a runaway, and others believed she may have been involved in organized crime. The case was even linked to the notorious serial killer Whitey Bulger. In October 2022, the FBI announced they had finally identified the Lady of the Dunes as Ruth Marie Terry using investigative genetic genealogy. This is, the technique where people who did Ancestry.com and 23andMe, they're able to sort of backtrace people's identity using those things. In August 2023, the Cape and Islands District Attorney's Office announced that Terry's husband, Guy Moldovan, was responsible for her death. Moldovan had a history of violence and had disappeared around the time of Terry's murder and died in 2002. Now, this case is just sort of another one of these examples of how 23andMe is used by law enforcement to identify people. And here it identified somebody who, was not identifiable before, a victim who is not identifiable, but it also identifies perpetrators. And a lot of people don't realize that. So when you go and you do your 23andMe, you might be helping find one of your lost relatives, or you might be snitching on one of your serial killer relatives. Up to you. Well, I guess not really up to you. Up to them. The East Bay Walls. The East Bay Walls are a series of mysterious walls found in the East Bay region of the San Francisco Bay Area in California. The walls are made of stacked stones, and their purpose and origins are unknown. The East Bay Walls are sometimes called the Berkeley Mystery Walls, and they're a network of low stone walls throughout the hills surrounding the San Francisco Bay Area in California. The walls are typically made of stacked stones without mortar, ranging in height from about 1 foot to 3 feet and width up to 3 feet. They run in discontinuous sections, varying in length from a few feet to over a half a mile. Some are relatively straight, while others form angles, rectangles, and even circles. Although they're called the East Bay Walls, they are not confined to the East Bay. They can be found throughout the Bay Area hills and extend as far north as Chico and Red Bluff in Northern California. The wall's origin and purposes are debated. They don't seem to form complete composure, so they likely weren't fences. They're also too low to have served as defensive barriers. This has led to various theories, some more outlandish than others. The most likely explanation is that they were built by ranchers or farmers to clear fields or rocks to help guide or corral livestock. This is supported by the fact that the walls often appear in areas that were historically used for grazing. Some other researchers suggest that the walls may have been built by indigenous people, by Native Americans, for purposes that we don't fully understand. They could have been used for territorial markings or ceremonial purposes or even astronomical alignments. There are other fringe theories that attribute the walls to ancient civilizations, such as Chinese laborers or even aliens. However, there's little to no evidence that support these claims. I have no idea how to pronounce this one. The Dowery Who. The Dowery Who is a creature from Irish folklore, and it's often described as a waterhound or even an Irish crocodile. Irish crocodile sounds like a drink. Here's what we know about it. It's typically depicted as a large, otter-like creature with dark fur and a long body and a thick tail. Some accounts describe it as having webbed feet and a mane like a horse, and it's said to be about the size of a large dog or even a small crocodile. Man, a hairy crocodile, huh? It's said to inhabit freshwater lakes and rivers, particularly in the more remote and less populated areas of Ireland. It's considered a fierce predator, known for its aggressive nature and its taste for human flesh. Legends often tell of it dragging people underwater to drown them and presumably eat them. It's considered a cryptid. We love cryptids here. Although it has not been scientifically proven, there are numerous anecdotes and stories passed down through generations suggesting a long belief in the creature. And, Irish people won't lie to you. I love cryptids. And I had never heard of this one before, but I like this idea of this Irish crocodile running around, snatching people, maybe having some whiskey in there, singing Danny Boy. Maybe this guy and the Loch Ness Monster hang out at like their local cryptid meetings. Scottish and Irish getting together. The Beast of Busco. The Beast of Busco is another cryptid, and it's said to live in the Folk Lake near Churubusco, Indiana. It's described as a giant snapping turtle, and it's become part of local folklore. The legend began in 1898 when a farmer named Oscar Folk reported seeing a huge turtle in the lake on the property. However, the story gained more traction in 1949 when several people claimed to have seen the creature. Witnesses described the beast as being enormous, with some estimations putting it at around 500 pounds, as big as a dining room table. It's said to have a shell about 5 feet long and 3 feet wide. There were numerous reported sightings of the beast in the late 1940s and early 1950s, sparking a turtle hunt that captured national attention. Despite the efforts, the Beast of Busco was never captured or definitively proven to exist. The legend of the Beast of Busco has become a source of local pride and a significant part of the town's identity. Churubusco is sometimes called Turtle Town, and the beast is featured on town signs and in local businesses. Every year, Churubusco holds a Turtle Days festival to celebrate the legend of the beast. The festival includes turtle races, a parade, and other festivities. Some believe that the Beast of Busco stories may have been exaggerated accounts of normal-sized snapping turtles. Another belief is that it was an alligator snapping turtle, which is the largest freshwater turtle in North America. Now, these things are nasty looking and they are huge. So if this was an exaggeration of seeing one of these things, I think that's probably it. people saw this giant ass snapping turtle and they're like, holy crap, it must have been like 5 feet tall or 5 feet round. I do think we need to go to Turtle Days, though, in Churubusco, Indiana. I don't know where that is, but, I live in the Chicago area, so it can't be that far from me, maybe at most a few hours away. So we should go do a field trip and go see the Beast of Busco and go do, Turtle Days. I think doing like a cryptids tour this summer might be pretty fun. We could do All My Spooky People. We could go do that. The Dover Demon. The Dover Demon is a cryptid that was reportedly sighted in Dover, Massachusetts in 1977. It quickly became a famous creature in cryptozoology, capturing the public's imagination and inspiring articles, books, and documentaries. Witnesses described a small, bipedal creature with large, watermelon-shaped head, glowing orange eyes, long, thin limbs, and no apparent nose or mouth. It's said to be hairless and to have rough, textured skin. The first reported sighting was by 17-year-old William Bartlett on April 21, 1977. He claimed to have seen the creature while driving along Farm Street. 2 other teenagers, Abby Brabham and John Baxter, reported seeing a similar creature later that night and the following evening. Cryptozoologist Lauren Coleman coined the term Dover Demon after investigating the sightings and interviewing the witnesses. Despite numerous investigations and theories, the identity of the Dover Demon remains a mystery. Some possible explanations include a misidentification of an animal, which is, I think, probably the most likely solution. Others believe it might have been a hoax perpetrated by the teenagers. And some people believe aliens. Despite the fact that the Dover Demon hasn't been proved to exist, it's had a large impact on popular culture and, in the area of Dover, Massachusetts. Now, I think it's probably either a misidentification of an animal or a hoax perpetrated by these teenagers, or maybe even a little bit of both. Maybe they saw something and then they just sort of ran with it. Maybe they were just being kids and just sort of exaggerated it. Cindy James. Cindy James was a Canadian nurse who claimed to be stalked and harassed by an unknown assailant in the 1980s. She was found dead in 1989, and her death was ruled a suicide, although some believe that she was murdered. Cindy James was born Cynthia Elizabeth Hack in 1944. She pursued a nursing career in Vancouver. She was a pediatric nurse at the Vancouver General Hospital and later the Blenheim House, a facility for children with behavioral disorders. Colleagues described her as competent and professional. See, I hope my colleagues would describe me as competent and professional, but I'm not sure I would get both of those. Cindy was married to Roy Makepeace, but they divorced in 1972. I guess they couldn't make peace, am I right? However, they remained friends, and Roy helped her during a period of harassment. And Roy helped her during the period of harassment she experienced. Starting in 1982, Cindy became the target of a relentless campaign of terror. She received threatening phone calls, notes, and letters. Her home was vandalized, her car was tampered with, and she was physically attacked on several occasions. The attacks escalated in severity over time, including incidents of being bound, gagged, and drugged. Cindy reported these incidents to the police, but despite extensive investigations, no suspect was ever identified. Some officers began to doubt her claims, suggesting she might be fabricating the events or suffering from mental health issues. In May 1989, Cindy disappeared from a shopping mall. Her body was found several days later in the backyard of an abandoned house. She had been drugged, strangled, and her hands and feet were bound. The official cause of death was ruled undetermined. While some investigators believed it was suicide, others suspected foul play. Cindy's family and friends maintained that she was murdered. The most prevalent theory is that Cindy was stalked and ultimately murdered by an unknown individual. However, the stalker's identity and motive remain a mystery. Others have suggested that Cindy may have suffered from mental illness and that caused her to fabricate the harassment and even harm herself. However, this theory is disputed by those who know her well. I think it's pretty absurd if her hands and legs were bound and she was drugged to suggest that this was self-unaliving or an accident. I think it's pretty clearly some sort of foul play, and it's pretty clear that she was murdered. So it's pretty terrible that she wasn't taken seriously by law enforcement, because that could have saved her life. Dropa Stones. The Dropa Stones are a collection of disc-shaped stones that were allegedly discovered in a cave in the Bayan Karaula Mountains of China in the 1930s. The stones supposedly contain hieroglyphic-like markings and tell the story of an ancient alien race that crashed on Earth. The authenticity of these stones is disputed. However, they've become a popular topic in UFOlogy and pseudo-archaeology circles. Did you know there are pseudo-archaeology circles? Well, now you do. The story is that they were discovered in a remote cave in 1938 and contained incredible details about this ancient alien crash. A Chinese archaeologist, Chi Pu Te, allegedly led an expedition that stumbled upon a cave filled with skeletal remains of small beings with unusually large heads. Alongside these remains were hundreds of stone discs, each about a foot in diameter, with strange symbols carved into them in a double spiral groove. The discs were supposedly made of granite and estimated to be about 12,000 years old. The symbols were described as tiny hieroglyphs, unlike any known writing system. Years later, a professor named Su Nui supposedly deciphered the symbols. The story claimed that the discs told the story of the Dropa, an alien race who crash-landed on Earth and were unable to repair their ship. They were forced to live among the local human population. There is significant skepticism about this story, mostly because it's riddled with inconsistencies and lacks credible evidence. No photographs of the discs in their original state exist, and the discs themselves have never been displayed publicly. Many of the names and sources associated with the story cannot be verified, and there's no record of the key individuals involved in the discovery or translation. The details of the Dropa Stones story seem to have originated from a fictional novel published in the 1960s. Therefore, the Dropa Stones are widely considered a hoax. I think this is almost certainly a hoax, but it's sort of funny that these guys tried to play this sort of fast one on everybody, like, oh yeah, I figured it out. Aliens. And then, people asking if we could see these things in the original state, and they're just like, no. But, what do I know? Maybe we're the ones. Maybe I'm the one who is a fool. Oh boy. The Lake Winnipesaukee Mystery Stone. This is an egg-shaped stone found in Lake Winnipesaukee in New Hampshire in 1872. It has a variety of carved symbols and a hole drilled through its center, and its purpose remains a mystery. It's about 4 inches long and 2.5 inches thick, made of a type of dark quartzite not found in the area. One side features carved images, including a face, an ear of corn, a teepee, circles, and various lines. The other has abstract symbols, including inverted arrows, a moon-shaped, dots, and a spiral. Workers were digging a hole for a fence post, reportedly found the stone. Seneca Ladd, the businessman who hired them, was given credit for the discovery. Always people like that. Always the people who front the money are always given the credit for everything, even though this guy didn't find this. The stone is currently on display at the Museum of New Hampshire History in Concord. There are a lot of theories attempting to explain the stone's origin and purpose. Some believe it was created by Native Americans, possibly as a ceremonial object, a boundary marker, or a record of treaty. Others suggest that it could be related to European settlers, perhaps as a trade token or a surveyor's marker. Others say it was a hoax possibly carved in the 19th century as a curiosity or a fake artifact. The stone's age is unknown, and no scientific dating has ever been performed. The symbols are undeciphered, and their meaning is open to interpretation. The purpose of the hole drilled through the stone is also unclear. Now, if you ask me, it kind of sounds like this was like some sort of a thing that was put on a necklace, you know? This is a pendant that was put on a necklace, and, you know, someone found it. Doesn't seem that weird when you think of it like that, right? Just a big, and, you know, it's not even that big, 4 inches? Big pendant that someone was wearing around their neck and they lost it, and then someone else found it, and, you know, trying to act like it's some sort of mystery object. The woman from Lem. The woman of Lem, also known as the goddess of death, is a small limestone statue discovered in Lem, Cyprus in 1878. It dates back to around 3500 BC and depicts a stylized female figure. While its purpose remains unknown, it has gained notoriety for a rather sinister reputation, a supposed curse that brings death to its owners. The statue is about 14 inches tall and depicts a naked pregnant woman with a short, outstretched arms, a high neck, and a raised head. It's believed to be a fertility goddess or a representation of a goddess whose name has been lost to time. It's similar to other figurines found in Cyprus during the same time period. The curse associated with the woman from Lem claims that anyone who owns or possesses the statue will die within 6 years, along with their entire family. Ooh. It's a gamble to hold on to that thing, huh? You know, while the curse is a good story, there's no credible evidence that supports it. And the names and details of its supposed victims are often unverified or fictionalized. It's currently housed in the Royal Scottish Museum in Edinburgh, Scotland, and there are no reports of any of the museum's staff or visitors experiencing any ill effects from its presence. I still wouldn't hang out with this thing. You know, I don't really believe in curses and all that kind of stuff, but, you know, in the risk-reward matrix, having this weird statue around you, I don't think it's very, very worth it. The Black Knight Satellite. The Black Knight Satellite is a purported artificial satellite that is said to be orbiting the Earth in a polar orbit. It is the subject of many mysteries and conspiracy theories. It's said to be an extraterrestrial satellite orbiting the Earth for thousands of years, and its existence is often cited as evidence of alien visitation or advanced ancient civilizations. It's believed that this story draws from several unrelated events and interpretations that have been sort of changed and passed around from time to time. And that's what happens with a lot of these things. You know, someone hears a story and then someone misunderstands the story and then tells someone else. In 1899, Nikola Tesla picked up unusual radio signals which he believed were from another planet. While these signals were likely naturally occurring, they fueled speculation about extraterrestrial communication. In the 1920s, amateur radio operators detected long-delayed echoes, a phenomenon where radio signals are reflected back to Earth after a delay of several seconds. While the long-delayed echoes have a scientific explanation, they were interpreted by some as evidence of an alien satellite. In the 1950s, several newspapers reported sightings of unidentified objects orbiting the Earth. These reports, attributed to a retired Marine Corps Major Donald Kehoe, further fueled speculation about a mysterious satellite. In 1998, during the STS-88 space shuttle mission, NASA astronauts photographed a black object near the International Space Station. These images were widely circulated as proof of the Black Knight satellite. However, NASA later identified the object as a thermal blanket that had been lost during a spacewalk. The Black Knight satellite theory claims that these disparate events are connected and point to a single object of extraterrestrial origin that has been orbiting Earth for approximately 13,000 years. Proponents of this theory suggest that the government and agencies like NASA are covering up its existence. You know, I'm on record as saying that I believe that it's impossible for there not to be alien life form. For there not to be other life form in our universe. So I believe in the existence of life outside of Earth. I also believe that if they were attempting to communicate with us, they have done a terrible job. So I'm very skeptical of any of this evidence of alien communication or alien work towards Earth, because either they don't really want to communicate with us or they're just really, really bad at it. There's no reason why, if they really, really wanted to talk to us, that they wouldn't be able to find people who are anyone else than just sort of randos that are walking around. We would be seeing them much more often, you would think. So I don't really believe, I don't really believe in the Black Knight satellite. I believe that it's probably a bunch of things that have been sort of mixed together to add to this conspiracy theory. But I could be wrong. The Mantel Incident. The Mantel Incident refers to the death of Kentucky Air National Guard pilot Captain Thomas F. Mantel in 1948 while he was pursuing an unidentified flying object. The Mantel Incident is a significant event in UFO lore, marking one of the first instances where a pilot lost their life while supposedly pursuing a UFO. It occurred on January 7, 1948, near Franklin, Kentucky, and continues to be debated by UFO enthusiasts and skeptics alike. Around 1:45 p.m., personnel at Godman Army Airport in Fort Knox, Kentucky, observed a large white object in the sky. It was described as being circular or disc-shaped and moving slowly. Captain Thomas F. Mantel, a decorated World War II pilot with the Kentucky Air National Guard, was leading a flight of 3 F-51 Mustang fighter planes. They were contacted by the airfield and asked to investigate the object. Mantel and 2 of his wingmen pursued the object, which climbed higher as they approached. One wingman broke off the pursuit due to lack of oxygen equipment for high-altitude flight. Mantel reported seeing the object and described it as metallic and of tremendous size. He continued to climb despite warnings about the lack of oxygen. Mantel's plane was later found crashed in a field near Franklin, Kentucky, and he was killed in the crash. The Air Force initially investigated the incident and concluded that Mantel had likely misidentified the planet Venus and had lost consciousness due to a lack of oxygen at that high altitude. Many UFO enthusiasts believe that Mantel encountered an extraterrestrial spacecraft and that the official explanation is a cover-up. Some have suggested that he was shot down by the UFO. This obviously remains a controversial event. While the official explanation points to misidentification and pilot error, the lack of definitive identification of the object and the circumstances surrounding the crash have fueled speculation about UFO involvement. And that's how this stuff always works. Somebody initially sees something, maybe reports it wrong, something happens, and then later a poor explanation is given. And then people assume that there is a conspiracy to cover up the thing that happened. I'm reading this. I don't really think that this was likely a UFO that he was pursuing, but the explanation that he was pursuing Venus is also very weird. So I could see how that could cause, people to doubt that official explanation. The Lubbock Lights. The Lubbock Lights are a series of unusual lights that were observed in the sky over Lubbock, Texas in 1951. They were photographed and investigated, but their origin remains unexplained. These sightings garnered national attention and became one of the most well-known UFO cases in U.S. history. The first sighting was on the evening of August 25, 1951, by 3 professors from Texas Technological College, which later would become Texas Tech University. They observed a formation of lights flying slightly overhead. They described the lights as bluish-green, arranged in a V or U shape, and moving rapidly across the sky. Over the following weeks, numerous residents of Lubbock reported seeing similar formations of lights. Some witnesses described the lights as hovering, changing direction abruptly, and even disappearing and reappearing. One of the most compelling pieces of evidence from the Lubbock Lights incident is a series of photographs taken by Carl Hart Jr., a student at Texas Tech. These photos show a string of lights in a V formation against the night sky. The U.S. Air Force investigated as part of its Project Blue Book investigation into UFO sightings. They initially suggested that the lights might be a reflection of streetlights off the bellies of birds, but the explanation was not widely accepted. The Air Force ultimately concluded that the most of the Lubbock Lights sightings were unidentified, except for one case that was attributed to radar malfunction. Now, the bird explanation is pretty terrible, I think, and I think that's where you run into some issues here. There's also another theory that these were migratory geese, but again, I've never seen geese light up. There are some suggestions that the lights were experimental military aircraft, and of course, aliens. Some have also suggested that it could possibly be ball lightning or some sort of atmospheric phenomena. I think whenever you're dealing with strange lights in the sky, it's probably something military or otherwise, aircraft related. Though the atmospheric phenomena theory also holds a lot of water to me. It could be some sort of light reflection or some sort of atmosphere reflection in the sky. Anna Baker's wedding dress. Anna Baker's wedding dress is on display at the Baker Mansion Museum in Altoona, Pennsylvania. It's said to be haunted by the ghost of Anna Baker, who was forbidden from marrying the man she loved. Visitors have reported seeing the dress move on its own. Anna Baker's wedding dress is more than just a garment. It's a relic with a tragic story, which may be why it has its reputation for being haunted. Anna Baker was the daughter of Elias Baker, a wealthy ironmaster in the mid-19th century. She fell in love with a low-class iron worker, but her father forbade her from marrying him. Heartbroken, Anna never married and kept the wedding dress she had chosen for her forbidden love. After Anna's death in 1914, the dress was placed in a glass case in her former bedroom in the Baker Mansion, which was turned into a museum. Visitors and staff began reporting strange occurrences surrounding the dress, including the dress seemingly moving on its own, swaying or even twirling within its case, despite being in a sealed environment. Others claim to have seen the reflection of a woman in the glass believed to be the ghost of Anna Baker herself. The dress has been nicknamed the wedding dress of sorrow due to the tragic story of Anna Baker and the eerie phenomena associated with it. The legend suggests that Anna's spirit is still attached to the dress, expressing her sadness and frustration over her lost love. While many believe the dress is haunted, others offer more rational explanations for the reported occurrences. Air currents or vibrations within the old house could be causing the dress to move. Reflections and shadows could create the illusion of a figure in the glass case. Also, when people think they're about to see something paranormal, they're more likely to see things that they attribute to paranormal activity. This is the power of suggestion. Now, I'm sure that a lot of the stuff that we hear about this dress, the movement, the reflections, I'm sure a lot of that is just sort of either, there's some environmental factor behind it or some sort of, misseeing things. But this haunted wedding dress in Altoona, Pennsylvania is a pretty nice story. It's a pretty good ghost story, and it's a bit of a unique one. So I think this is an interesting story and something that's worth checking out. Cohingham's Black Pebbles. Cohingham's Black Pebbles are black pebbles found on the beach of Cohingham, a small island near Koh Lanta in Thailand. The pebbles are considered sacred by locals and are believed to bring good luck. They're more than just smooth, shiny stones. They're at the center of a fascinating legend and a conservation effort. This tiny, uninhabited island off the coast of Thailand is covered with these distinctive pebbles. And the local lore says that there is something paranormal about these pebbles. According to Thai mythology, the god Taratau protects Koh Hingham and has placed a curse on anyone who removes the black pebbles from the island. It's said that those who take the pebbles will suffer endless bad luck until the stones are returned. Now, I know what you're thinking. Did I accidentally take some of those stones? You better check your pockets. The pebbles are black and white and have a smooth, almost polished appearance. They're not precious in that they don't contain valuable minerals, but the legend attached to them makes them significant to Thai culture. While the legend attributes the pebbles to the god Taratau, they are naturally occurring. They likely formed over time from volcanic rock eroded and smoothed by the sea. One thing that's sort of fascinating about the curse is that it seems to work, although not in the traditional way that you might think. Every year, the National Park Office that manages Koh Hingham receives packages from around the world containing black pebbles and letters of apology. People who have taken the pebbles often report experiencing misfortunes and believe returning the stones is the only way to break the curse. Now, as we've discussed, the human experience is a series of misfortunes. So I think it's more likely that people happen to be experiencing normal misfortunes and they just so happened to have taken these pebbles. The legend helps prevent the island's unique environment. People are less likely to damage the ecosystem or remove large quantities of pebbles if they fear bad luck. The returned pebbles are used to maintain the island's natural beauty, and they're often placed back on the beaches or used to create small shines. You can go visit Koh Hingham. You can go admire the pebbles, but you probably shouldn't take them when you depart, either if you believe in the curse or from a conservationist perspective. The Berkshire UFO Incident. The Berkshire UFO Incident refers to a series of reported UFO sightings that occurred on Labor Day, September 1st, 1969, in Berkshire County, Massachusetts. It gained renewed attention in 2020 when it was featured in an episode of Netflix's Unsolved Mysteries. Here's what happened. Over 250 people reportedly witnessed strange lights and a UFO in the skies above Berkshire County that night. The witnesses included families, individuals, and even police officers. The most common description was a large, disc-shaped object with bright lights. Some witnesses purported seeing beams of light emanating from the object. Several of the witnesses, including young children, claimed to have experienced missing time and strange memories associated with the event, suggesting possible alien abduction experiences or some other psychological or mental manipulation. Despite the large number of witnesses, there's little physical evidence to support the sightings. No photographs or videos of the UFOs were taken, and there are no radar records or official documentation from the time. Despite the lack of hard evidence, the Great Barrington Historical Society and some Massachusetts historians recognize the incident as a significant local event. A monument was erected in Sheffield, Massachusetts to commemorate the sightings, though it was later removed. Of course, there are skeptics who question the reliability of the witness accounts and the lack of concrete evidence. The incident's prominence in the Unsolved Mysteries miniseries has also been criticized for potentially sensationalizing the story. And of course it sensationalizes the story. That was the whole purpose of Unsolved Mysteries. You know, we've talked about a lot of UFO sightings, and this could be a whole variety of things. This one is sort of a lot more vague and has a lot less concrete details. A lot of the ones that we've talked about have pictures or some form of evidence, and there doesn't really seem to be any here. So while it's completely possible that these people saw something in the air, it's also just as equally possible as that, you know, they saw planes or weather balloons or military aircraft or, you know, were just mistaken based on what they saw. You know, without evidence, you kind of have to remain skeptical. The Monster of Florence. The Monster of Florence is the nickname given to an unidentified serial killer who operated in the Florence, Italy area between 1968 and 1985. The killer targeted couples and was known for mutilating his victims. This case remains one of Italy's most infamous unsolved mysteries because of its brutal nature and the ongoing debate surrounding the killer's identity. The Monster of Florence murdered 16 people, primarily young couples parked in secluded areas. He typically attacked at night using a .22 caliber Beretta pistol to shoot the victims. He often mutilated the female victims. The killer's signature was the removal of the left breast from one of the female victims, which he supposedly kept as a trophy. There have been a significant amount of investigations involving these crimes. They've been plagued by false leads, misdirection, and accusations of police incompetence and corruption. Several individuals have been arrested and convicted, but doubts remain about their guilt, and many believe the real Monster of Florence is still at large. Some of the suspects have included Pietro Pecciani, a farmer with a history of violence. Pecciani was convicted in 1994, but later acquitted on appeal. He died in 1998 before a retrial could take place. Mario Vanni and Giancarlo Lotti. These two men, known as the companions of the monster, were convicted in 1994 for the double homicides. Numerous other individuals have been investigated and considered possible suspects, including members of a suspected satanic cult. The current most common theory is that the Monster of Florence was a single individual acting alone. However, there are other people who believe that this was an organized group or cult. The killer's motives remain unclear, but the theories range from sexual sadism to ritualistic killings. I think we learned from the Amanda Knox trial that Italy's court system is pretty flawed. And it's sort of fascinating to me that they've managed to try and convict people, and yet people are like, yeah, we don't think that this is it. This is a particularly disturbing case, though, and a disturbing individual, whoever was behind these. I do feel like it's likely to me that the Italy court system might have gotten this wrong. The Cleveland Torso Murderer. The Cleveland Torso Murderer is an unidentified serial killer who operated in Cleveland, Ohio in the 1930s. The killer dismembered his victims and often left their remains in public places. The killer was also known as the Mad Butcher of Kingsbury Run, and this case remains an infamous, unsolved mystery. There are at least 12 victims that are confirmed, although some estimates put the number as high as 20. Most were transients or residents of the city's shantytowns. He targeted vulnerable, unhoused people. The killer was known for the brutal dismemberment of the victims' bodies. Most were decapitated, and many were dismembered further, with body parts often found scattered in different locations. The majority of the victims' remains were discovered in the impoverished area of Kingsbury Run, a valley with a creek running through it. The murders occurred primarily between 1935 and 1938, although some possible related cases date back to the late 1920s. The investigation was led by Elliot Ness, yes, the famous Elliot Ness, who brought down Al Capone in Chicago. Despite his efforts, the killer has never been caught. Because of the killer's high degree of skill in his mutilation of the bodies, there is speculation that he had anatomical knowledge or experience. And almost all the victims were decapitated, and in many cases, the heads were never found. Some of the victims showed evidence of chemical treatment being applied to their bodies, possibly to preserve them or hinder the investigation. Now, there are a few suspects. One is Dr. Francis E. Sweeney, who was a doctor with a history of mental illness. He was considered a prime suspect by Elliot Ness. He was interrogated but never charged, and the murder stopped after he was committed to a mental institution. Frank DeLiesel. Frank DeLiesel was a bricklayer who confessed to one of the murders but later recanted. DeLiesel was found self-unalived in his jail cell under suspicious circumstances. Willie Johnson, who was convicted of a later murder that bore similarities to the Torso murders. Johnson was suspected of being involved but never definitively linked to the earlier crimes. The killer's identity, motives, and the full extent of their crimes may forever remain a mystery. The case continues to fascinate true crime people. I think that it's very unlikely, considering how old this case is, that there will be any definitive answers as to what happened. There's supposedly DNA testing underway to try to identify both victims and the perpetrator and the killer. But the problem is there's very little evidence. So outside of speculation, and most likely the person who was involved, or I would say almost certainly the person who did this is deceased now. So it's very unlikely outside of speculation that it will ever be known who did this. The Polly effect, not DJ Polly. From the Jersey Shore. Might be dating myself with that reference. This is a humorous term referring to the anecdotal observation that technical equipment tends to malfunction in the presence of physicist Wolfgang Pauli. The Pauli effect has been named after the renowned physicist Wolfgang Pauli. The effect refers to the anecdotal observation that technical equipment tends to malfunction or break down in the presence of certain people, particularly those with a reputation for absent-mindedness or lack of practical skills. For example, I've always called this the Kenny effect whenever I'm around printers. Wolfgang Pauli was a brilliant theoretical physicist known for his work in quantum mechanics and his famous exclusion principle. However, he was notoriously clumsy and had a reputation for being a jinx when it came to environmental equipment. There are numerous anecdotes about strange occurrences and equipment breakdown occurring around Pauli, such as a cyclotron breaking down when he entered the lab, a complex experimental setup inexplicably collapsing during a demonstration he was attending, a train carriage decoupling from the rest of the train while he was on board. He remained safely in his carriage, though. He was fine. Pauli himself was aware of his reputation and seemed to believe in the effect to some extent. He once wrote to a colleague, "It is my earnest request that you do not come to Zurich for the time being. For the moment, my presence here is indispensable because of the Pauli effect." The explanation here seems to be confirmation bias, right? People may be more likely to remember and report incidences like this when someone like Pauli is present because they're more primed to believe that they're responsible. Though there's also the possibility of psychological factors, like someone's nervousness or anxiety could create people to be more, create more mistakes or clumsy, and that could cause more accidents. Now, I don't personally believe that there's a paranormal explanation to this one, but of course, it could be that certain people are, just cursed. And like I said, I think the best explanation here is the confirmation bias explanation, but, you can believe whatever you want. The Levelland UFO case. The Levelland UFO case refers to a series of UFO sightings that occurred near Levelland, Texas in 1957. Witnesses reported seeing large, egg-shaped objects that interfered with their vehicles' electrical systems. This case, the Levelland UFO case, occurred on the night of November 2nd and 3rd, 1957, in and around the small town of Levelland, Texas. Over the span of just a few hours, the Levelland Police Department received numerous calls from terrified drivers reporting encounters with bright, glowing objects that hovered near their vehicles, causing their engines to die and their headlights to fail. Witnesses consistently described the objects as being large, egg-shaped, or cylindrical, with bright lights and hovering or moving slowly near the ground. A common thread in the reports is the apparent electromagnetic interference caused by the objects. Cars, trucks, and even a police car experienced engine failure, headlight malfunctions, and other electrical problems when the objects were nearby. The most detailed accounts came from Pedro Saucedo and Joe Salas, who were driving west of Levelland when they encountered a bright glowing object that caused their truck's engine to stall. They described the object rising up from the road and approaching the truck before it flew away, after which the truck started working again. Officer A.J. Fowler, a Levelland police officer, investigated many of the reports that night. He initially dismissed them as pranks, but eventually witnessed the strange lights himself and experienced radio interference while driving his patrol car. The U.S. Air Force, as part of its Project Blue Book investigation, looked into the Levelland cases, and they attributed the sightings to ball lightning and an electrical storm in the area. However, many UFO researchers and witnesses dispute this explanation, arguing that the number of reports, the consistency of the descriptions, and the reported electromagnetic effects suggest something more unusual. Now, we had talked about ball lightning in a previous one of these videos. Critics argue that ball lightning doesn't typically cause this kind of widespread electromagnetic interference. Another explanation that's been offered is an electrical storm. However, witnesses reported seeing the objects before and after the storm, and some reported no signs of the storm at all. Many UFO researchers believe the level and case represents a genuine encounter with an unidentified flying object, or objects, possibly of extraterrestrial origin. They point to the number of witnesses, the consistency of the descriptions, and the reported electromagnetic effects as evidence. Now, I think it's probably most likely that there was some sort of atmospheric event that caused this rather than UFOs. I don't know that if the electrical storm explanation or the ball lightning explanation is the entire thing, or if that's just, what we know about, kind of going back and looking at what happened. That said, as I've said many times, I believe in aliens, and I believe that aliens exist somewhere. I just also think that the way that these encounters supposedly are described makes me think that these are probably not actual alien encounters. The Fort Worth Missing Trio. The Fort Worth Missing Trio refers to the unsolved disappearance of 3 young girls, Mary Rachel Trelica, Lisa Renee Wilson, and Julianne Mosley, from a shopping mall in Fort Worth, Texas, on December 23, 1974. This case has haunted Fort Worth, Texas, and captivated the nation for decades. This is what we know. On the day of the disappearance, 17-year-old Rachel Trelica, 14-year-old Renee Wilson, and 9-year-old Julie Mosley went Christmas shopping at the Seminary South Shopping Center in Fort Worth. They were driving Rachel's Oldsmobile. Rachel told her husband, Tommy, that they were at the mall and planned to be home by 4 p.m. That was the last time anyone heard from her. Rachel's car was found in the mall parking lot later that day. Some of the girls' purchases were still inside, suggesting that they hadn't finished their shopping. There were no signs of a struggle. A letter, allegedly written by Rachel, arrived at her home a few days later. It claimed that the girls had gone to Houston and would be back in a week. However, the letter's authenticity has been questioned and the girls have never returned. Despite extensive investigation and searches, and even a psychic's involvement, the girls have never been found. The case remains open, and the Fort Worth Police Department continues to receive tips. There are several theories that have emerged over what happened to these girls. Some believe that the girls just simply ran away, the letter being the evidence that they decided to run away. But their families and friends insist that this is unlikely. Many believe the girls were abducted, but the lack of evidence and the passage of time have made it difficult to support this theory. There have been occasional reported sightings of the girls over the years, but none that have been confirmed. My belief here is that these girls were abducted. That's sad and that's scary. I believe it's certainly possible that they ran away, but I think it's very unlikely for 3 people to run away like that and never be seen from again. Never be heard from again. So sadly, I think there was foul play, and who knows what happened to these girls. It's heartbreaking. The Paris Catacombs Mystery Man. The Paris Catacombs Mystery Man refers to the discovery of a camera and film in the Paris catacombs in 2000. It has become a popular urban legend. The camera contained photos and videos of a man exploring the catacombs, but his identity and fate remain unknown. The footage was shot on a black and white video recorder and surfaced sometime in the early 1990s. It depicts a man exploring the catacombs of Paris. He initially appears calm, even picking up bones. As the video progresses, his pace quickens, eventually turning into a panicked run. The footage ends abruptly with the man dropping the camera and disappearing into the darkness. The footage was reportedly found by a group of cataphiles, people who explore catacombs, and it's gained wide attention after being featured on a TV show in the year 2000. Despite the footage's popularity, the man's identity remains unknown. No one has come forward to claim the footage or identify the man. No missing report matching his description has ever been filed. The most common theory is that the man simply got lost, panicked, and eventually found his way out, though this doesn't explain why he never came forward. But maybe he was embarrassed. Others believe he had an encounter with someone or something. Some speculate that there was something in the catacombs that caused him to panic, and who knows what happened. And there's always the belief that this is just possibly a hoax that was staged for effect. This was around the time that the Blair Witch Project came out, so it could have been someone trying to, do some found footage stuff. It's important to know that exploring the catacombs outside of the authorized areas is illegal and dangerous, and really, really damn spooky. I think it's probably most likely that this was either some sort of a prank or some sort of ARG or viral marketing campaign, or the guy just got out and just doesn't really want to be known as this guy. Frank Hayes. Frank Hayes was an American jockey who died in 1923 after suffering a heart attack during a horse race. Incredibly, his horse, Sweet Kiss, continued to run and won the race, making him the only deceased jockey to ever win a race. On June 4th, 1923, at Belmont Park in New York, Frank Hayes rode a horse named Sweet Kiss in a steeplechase. Sweet Kiss was a long shot with the odds of 20-1. Despite this, the horse won the race. After the race, it was discovered that Frank Hayes had died of a heart attack during the race. His body remained in the saddle as Sweet Kiss crossed the finish line. This is probably a pretty good thing to keep in mind for some sort of bar trivia. There is a jockey that won a race while dead. I don't know. I'm not much for horse racing. I don't know that many people are. The Chicago Tylenol murders. Kind of surprised to see this one this low on this list. This deep in the iceberg. But the Chicago Tylenol murders refers to a series of poisoning deaths that occurred in the Chicago metropolitan area in 1982. The victims had all ingested Tylenol-branded acetaminophen capsules that had been laced with potassium cyanide. The case remains unsolved. 7 people died. The victims were Mary Kellerman, who was 12 years old, Adam Janis, who was 27 years old, Stanley Janis, who was 25 years old, Teresa Janis, who was 20 years old, Mary McFarland, 31, Paula Prince, who was 35, and Mary Rayner, who was 27. The deaths occurred over a few days in late September 1982. The incident caused widespread panic and led to a massive recall of Tylenol products. It also had a significant impact on the way over-the-counter medications are packaged, leading to the introduction of tamper-evident packaging. Despite a large-scale investigation, the perpetrator has never definitively been identified. James William Lewis was considered a prime suspect, but he was never charged with the poisoning. He was later convicted of extortion for sending a letter to Johnson & Johnson, who are the makers of Tylenol, demanding money to stop the killings. The Tylenol murders led to the tamper-evident packaging that you now find on basically every single bottle of pills that you can buy over the counter. This is a tragic event. This is an important part in American history because first, it started creating corporate responsibility for these products, both in the tamper-evident packaging and the different ways that these types of pills were packaged in order to keep people safe. But another interesting part of this is that Johnson & Johnson and Tylenol's response to this incident is considered the gold standard for product recalls and how a company reacts to a defective product. And now well-run companies follow the blueprint of Johnson & Johnson in their reaction to this case. There have been theories that John Wayne Gacy or Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber, were the perpetrators of these crimes. But there's no specific evidence tying them to those crimes. Those are only theories. Dorothy Jane Scott. Dorothy Jane Scott was an American woman who disappeared in 1980 after attending a company meeting in Anaheim, California. Her remains were found 4 years later. She was a young single mother and was the victim of this tragic unsolved murder. However, her case is known for the phone calls her mother received from her killer after her disappearance. On May 28, 1980, Dorothy drove two of her coworkers to a hospital after one of them was bitten by a spider. While waiting for a prescription to be filled, she went to move her car closer to the entrance. She was never seen alive again. In the months leading up to her disappearance, Dorothy had been receiving disturbing phone calls from an anonymous male stalker. After her disappearance, her mother, Vera Scott, began receiving phone calls from a man claiming to have murdered Dorothy. The calls were disturbing, revealing details about Dorothy's appearance and last moments that were not public knowledge. In 1984, 4 years later after she went missing, Dorothy's skeletal remains were found in a remote area in Anaheim Hills. Despite the disturbing phone calls and the discovery of the remains, the identity of Dorothy's killer remains unknown, and the case is still considered open, but it's gone cold over the years. This case sort of seems prime for someone to figure out who it is sort of after the fact through sort of DNA evidence or the 23andMe DNA evidence, but we'll see. The Hall Mills murder case. The Hall Mills murders case, it refers to the murder of Eleanor Reinhardt Mills and Edward Wheeler Hall in New Brunswick, New Jersey in 1922. The case involved a prominent Episcopal rector and a member of his choir, and it became a media sensation. The Hall Mills murder case is one of the most infamous unsolved crimes of the early 20th century. Edward Wheeler Hall was an Episcopal priest at St. John the Evangelist Episcopal Church in New Brunswick, New Jersey. Eleanor Reinhardt Mills was a member of Hall's choir. On September 14, 1922, Hall and Mills were found dead in a secluded lover's lane near a farm in Franklin Township, New Jersey. Hall was shot in the head, and Mills was shot and had her throat cut. The scene suggested a love affair gone wrong, with evidence pointing to a possible struggle. Frances Noel Stevens Hall, who is Edward Hall's wife, is the primary suspect, with jealousy being her main motive. Henry, William, and Mary Stevens, who are Frances Hall's brothers and sister, are suspected of helping her sister commit the murders. The case went to trial in 1926 with intense media coverage. Despite the strong suspicion, Frances Hall and her brothers were acquitted due to lack of sufficient evidence. The case remains officially unsolved. This case became one of the first media circus cases in crime reporting. The case was also a scandal because it involved an affair between a clergyman and a married woman. It's sort of interesting that there isn't much about Mills's husband and whether he was involved in this case based on my research. But I think that might be a good place to look. But, most likely either the husband or the wife, right? Missy Bevers. Missy Bevers was a fitness instructor who was murdered in Midlothian, Texas in 2016. She was found dead inside a church where she was preparing to teach a class. The case remains unsolved. Her case has received national attention due to the unusual circumstances of the case. On April 18, 2016, Missy Bevers arrived early in the morning at Creekside Church of Christ in Midlothian to prepare for a Camp Gladiator fitness class she was leading. She was found dead inside the church with multiple puncture wounds. Surveillance footage from inside the church showed an unidentified person in what appeared to be police tactical gear walking around the hallways before Missy arrived. The person is considered to be the prime suspect in the murder.
Recorded on surveillance video, roaming the halls of the church with a distinctive gait and dressed in police-style garb.
Despite extensive investigation and the release of the surveillance footage, the police have been unable to identify or apprehend the killer, and the case remains unsolved. Now, the surveillance footage here is pretty weird, and so I see why this is such a popular case. It's also sort of fascinating to me that even though this occurred just 8 years ago, in 2016, that they're not able to figure out who this guy was. And I think now it would be much easier to figure out who this individual was for a variety of reasons, based on the vast amount of cameras that are available and the other types of techniques of identifying people that have sort of emerged since then. So while this case seems really recent, technologically speaking, it was from a different time. The Carol A. Deering. The Carol A. Deering was a 5-masted schooner, or a ship, that was found run aground and abandoned off the coast in North Carolina in 1921. The ship's crew was missing and their fate remains a mystery. The ship was built in 1919 in Bath, Maine by the G.G. Deering Company and named after the owner's son. In 1920, the Deering set sail on a commercial voyage to Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, with a crew of about 10 men. On January 31st, 1921, the Deering was spotted aground on Diamond Shoals off Cape Hatteras, North Carolina, a notoriously dangerous area known as the Graveyard of the Atlantic. When rescuers boarded the ship, they found it completely deserted. The crew was gone and there were signs of a hasty departure, but no clear indication of what happened. Many theories have emerged to explain the disappearance of the crew, including a mutiny, piracy, an attack by pirates, storms. Severe weather could have forced the crew to abandon the ship, or paranormal activity. Maybe ghosts did it. Now, these old maritime cases are, particularly spooky because the ocean is scary and spooky, and who knows what could have happened to these people. They could have had some sort of mass hysteria event. They could have been taken off and taken out into the ocean and never seen again. It's hard to know. It's hard to know when you're dealing with the ocean because the ocean is so vast and powerful, and who knows what could have happened to these people. High Brazel. The High Brazel is a mythical island said to appear off the west coast of Ireland once every 7 years. It's described as paradise with lush vegetation and advanced civilization. It started appearing on maps as early as the 14th century and persists in Irish folklore. The most distinctive nature of the High Brazel Island is its elusive nature. It was said to be shrouded in mist, only becoming visible for 1 day every 7 years. Even then, it remains unreachable. It's typically depicted on maps west of Ireland. Its exact location has varied, though. Some maps have placed it southwest of Galway Bay. It's described as a lush, fertile land, sometimes said to be inhabited by advanced civilization or even gods and goddesses from Irish mythology. In some stories, it's home to magical creatures like large black rabbits. On many of the maps, the High Brazel is drawn as a near-perfect circle with a central channel or a strait running through it. The name High Brazel is believed to be derived from the Irish meaning descendants of Brazel, a high king in the Irish mythology. Legends tell of voyages to High Brazel by figures like St. Brendan and Berend, who return with tales of the paradise-like island. There were also reported sightings of the island throughout history, further fueling the myth. High Brazel's appearance on maps for centuries, even by reputable map makers, contributed to the belief in its existence. This reflects when geographical knowledge was incomplete and myths and legends were often intertwined with cartography. Has to have been kind of wild to be making maps and having no idea what you were making. Now, this is just sort of a fun story. I think it's pretty clear now with the satellite imagery that this island doesn't actually exist. But it's sort of fascinating to think that, during this time, centuries ago, people would try to make maps and places that weren't real made it onto these maps. And it sort of shows you how misinformation was legitimized in earlier times. Cadaver Synod. Cadaver Synod was an event that took place in Rome in the year 1897. Pope Stephen VI had the corpse of his predecessor, Pope Formosus, exhumed and put on trial. The corpse was found guilty of various crimes and was mutilated and thrown into the Tiber River. Hate to be the lawyer representing the corpse, huh? Your Honor, my client smells terrible. Pope Formosus was Pope from 1891 to 1896. He was only Pope for 5 years. Wow. His papacy was marked by political turmoil and conflict. In 1897, Pope Stephen VI had Formosus' body exhumed, dressed in papal vestments, and placed on trial in the Basilica of St. John's Lateran. Formosus was accused of perjury, usurping the papacy, holding multiple bishoprics simultaneously, which was against church law. The trial was obviously a spectacle. He was found guilty and his papacy was declared invalid. His acts were annulled, and the fingers of his right hand, which were used for blessings, were cut off. The Cadaver Synod caused widespread outrage and further instability in the papacy. Stephen VI was eventually overthrown and imprisoned, where he was unalived. Later, Pope Theodore II reinstated Formosus and had his body reburied with honor. I have no idea how they found it after they threw it into a river, but wild. Just what a wild thing to occur, and it sort of shows you that these wild power struggles are not new. It just seems to be part of human nature to do this kind of insane stuff. The Indus Valley Civilization. The Indus Valley Civilization was a Bronze Age civilization that flourished in the northwestern region of the Indian subcontinent from 3300 to 1300 BC. It was one of the largest and most advanced civilizations of its time, known for its urban planning, sophisticated drainage systems, standardized weights and measures. The Harappan language was used by the people of the Indus Valley Civilization remains undeciphered, despite numerous attempts by linguists and archaeologists. Well, the civilization was primarily in what is now Pakistan and northwest India, and it featured very sophisticated urban planning. Cities like Mohenjo-daro and Harappa featured grid-like layouts, advanced drainage and sanitation systems, and well-built brick structures. The IVC also engaged in extensive trade with Mesopotamia and other regions, exchanging goods like pottery, textiles, and precious stones. The fascinating thing, though, is its writing, its language, is undeciphered. And, there are people who study their whole lives. There are people who have studied their whole lives to figure out language and learn how to solve languages, and no one's been able to solve this language. That's fascinating. Caspar Hauser. Caspar Hauser was a German youth who appeared in Nuremberg in 1828 with a mysterious past. He claimed he was raised in isolation. He had limited social skills and very limited knowledge of the world. He claimed to have spent his entire life confined to a darkened cell. His story and death sparked controversy, making him one of the 19th century's most famous unsolved mysteries. On May 26, 1828, a teenage boy appeared in the streets of Nuremberg, Germany. He carried a letter addressed to a captain in the local cavalry regiment. The letter claimed that the boy had been kept in confinement since childhood and had only recently been released. The boy could barely speak or walk, and his mental development was seemed severely stunted. He could, however, write his name, Caspar Hauser. Hauser claimed that he had been kept in a dark cell his entire life, with only a straw bed and a few wooden toys. He said he had been fed only bread and water and had never seen another human being, and his story attracted considerable public attention. And he became the subject of fascination. Many people wondering where this guy came from and why he was confined the way he was. There are a lot of theories about his identity, including that he was a member of the Baden royal family and had been hidden away to prevent him from claiming his birthright. On December 17, 1833, Hauser died from a stab wound in Ansbach. He claimed he had been attacked by a stranger in the park. The circumstances of his death have also been mysterious, as no one knows why he was attacked. It's hard to know because of how old this case is, how true the story is. Nearly 200 years old. But if he was raised in total isolation like that, that's terrible. This is just an example of child abuse, and that's a heartbreaking case. All right, everybody, we did it. That is tier 4. The end of tier 4 of this Iceberg series. We have 2 more tiers to go, tier 5 and tier 6. I will be working on tier 5 soon. We'll have that video out soon. Make sure that you're following me on Blue Sky and TikTok. My username is AKBruise. Follow me on Twitter if you're not following me there. My username is AKBruise there also. If there is a spooky, disturbing story you would like me to cover, send me an email. My email is thespookylawyer@gmail.com. I appreciate you watching my videos. I appreciate your support. So thank you for watching. Please make sure you're subscribed to this channel, The Spooky Lawyer. Make sure that you like, subscribe, hit the bell to receive notifications, all that. And, of course, stay spooky.